Sato Ma Sangamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityama Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Ma Edhi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Te Namam Pahinityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through, O Lord, and protect us evermore with your loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Swami Arupeshananda. Is this good? Can you hear me? My name is Swami Arupeshananda. That's better, huh? And the title of today's talk is From Politics to Perfection. It's one of those how to save the world talks that I occasionally feel compelled to give. Because I think that we all, at some level, if we feel we can't save the world, we'd like to at least help the world. We'd like to at least make the world an ever so slightly better place. Maybe even a lot better, but perhaps that's not realistic. But we have this urge to make the world a better place. We want to help the world. I think that this is a nearly universal motive. I think even some of the villains in the history books really had in their minds a very warped idea of helping the world. Chairman Mao had his Cultural Revolution. He's searching for equality, wound up killing all kinds of people. Putin has some idea of helping Russia by this murderous war, right? We have even the villains, I think, of today and of yore, have this urge to help. It's just misguided, right? And so the question is, how can we really help? How can we help the world? According to Vedanta, there are three kinds of help that we can give. The lowest kind of help is physical help. So, give a hungry man a meal. Why is it the lowest kind of help? Or cure him of a disease. Why is this the lowest kind of help? Because it is the briefest, most transitory, ephemeral help that we can give, right? He'll be hungry again. He'll get sick again, right? That is physical help. Next up on the list of ways that we can help is educational help, right? Because then we empower the person, teach them about hygiene, right? Give a man a fish or teach a man a fish. We all know that old adage. Teach a man a fish, he'll have food for a lifetime. So the next highest level of help is educational help. And then, of course, according to Vedanta, the highest kind of help is spiritual help. And why is that? Because spiritual help is said to last forever. It satisfies all of our wants forever. And this, when I was thinking about this talk, this reminded me of an old proverb, Chinese proverb, that I learned from our Swami Yogeshananda, whose face you see on this pillow here. Anyway, some of you remember him. He lived here for many years. I lived here with him. And I heard him say this. You might not know, his parents, his father did some missionary work in Peking, China, before he was born. And so between the world wars, Yogeshananda's father was an MD and did some work in China. So he probably picked up this adage during that time. And I'm guessing Yogeshananda probably heard it when he was a kid. It goes like this. If you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. If you want to be happy for a month, get married. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. Kind of a little jab at the institution of marriage there. If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, devote yourself to a noble cause. And if you want to be happy for eternity, know yourself. Okay, I don't need that. Maybe I do. I have a little swig here. So, same idea. Knowing yourself is spiritual knowledge, right? What do we know ourselves as now? Now we know ourselves as body-minds, right? This body with some mind that seems to animate it and make it move. Well, behind that, there is something else. Know that behind the body-mind appearance to reach eternal happiness, right? And how does that work? Swami Vivekananda explains it to us. He says that this works because it satisfies our wants forever. He says it is only with the knowledge of the Spirit that the faculty of want is annihilated forever. So helping a man spiritually is the highest help that can be given to him. And why does it annihilate the faculty of want? First of all, why is want bad? I mean, it's satisfying our wants. Some of us who haven't thought of this before maybe think that that's fun, right? You have some desire, you go fulfill it, that's fun, right? But what if why is it fun? The reason it's fun is because you don't have that desire anymore. Isn't that right? And so if you could satisfy all of them and have no desires, right? All your desires would be fulfilled. The faculty of wants would be gone. What does that mean? It means perfect fulfillment. A state difficult to imagine, really. Perfect fulfillment. Forever. That is the promise of self-knowledge, right? And how do we get perfect fulfillment forever? How does the knowledge of spirit translate into this perfect fulfillment? It is taught in Vedanta that once we become aware of our own divine nature, we were supposed to do this before this started, but this is how it worked out. Anyway, once we become aware of our own divine nature, that awareness is an awareness of the infinite, right? The Spirit is infinite. And so once we become aware of our divine nature, we become aware of the infinite. Once we become aware of the infinite, our interest in this particular finite thing, this body-mind thing that was born, has a personal history, and will die, just begins to wane because it's just not very interesting anymore, right? Compared with the infinite and eternal, yes, there's a body and a mind there. Yes, it has some peculiar history and some needs. Those needs aren't going away, right? Even if I become spiritually illumined, the body's still going to get hungry and sick. So actually, this satisfaction comes from essentially losing interest in this phenomenal existence and becoming more and more identified with that infinite existence, right? That is why the knowledge of the spirits eliminates all wants forever. Perfect satisfaction eternally. And so this is the highest knowledge that we can give. This is the best thing we can do for the world. Give people this knowledge. Well, what's the obvious problem? Wow, such a selection. Cool. I know. The obvious problem is that what if I don't have it? How can I give what I don't have? Right? That's the obvious problem. And so we think, what should I do? Right? Does that mean I can't do anything? I mean, the list of people in the history of the world who could actually hand over spiritual knowledge, which is said can be done. You can actually hand spiritual knowledge to someone like you hand them a banana. It's that tangible, they say. It can be handed over that tangibly, spiritual awareness. But the list of people in the history of the world who have actually done this, very small, right? Buddha, Jesus, Ramakrishna, how many others? I don't know, a few, probably. And so what are the odds that I'm ever going to be able to give this in my life? Should I run off to a cave and try and be spiritual and so that I can do this? Well, the list of people who have gone to caves to be spiritual is much longer than the list of people who actually could do this, right? So even that doesn't seem like such a promising idea. So how can we hope to help the world spiritually when we don't have this wonderful power? That's the question, right? Swami Paramananda is a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. He gives us a kind of explanation. He says, the true help that you can render to mankind is when by your very character you teach others. Then you do good by your every word, your every movement. When, for instance, you remain steady under all conditions of good and evil, those around you learn the value of steadiness, and they begin to practice it for themselves. Thus, by the example of your character, your whole life becomes a lesson to others. And so, this is a model for how we can actually be part of this transfer of spiritual consciousness, right? And it's a teaching, but I don't think we actually really have to believe it like we believe in religious dogma. I think a lot of us have actually experienced this. When we live with someone close up who has some noble quality, some virtue, and we become aware of this virtue, and this takes work. Mostly we become aware of people's faults. That's what we naturally become aware of. That's easy, right? Becoming aware of their virtues takes a little effort, sometimes a lot of efforts. But once we do become aware of a real virtue in someone, he has steadiness, peace, sympathy, whatever it is, some virtue in a character that we are in close contact with. When we become aware of that, we are sold on the product. We are absolutely sold on the product in a way that no Bible and no Quran and no Veda can sell us on the product. When you see someone living this in their life, in the midst of life's challenges, and you see the advantage of it and that it really can be done, then you're sold. Right? So yes, it's a spiritual teaching. On the other hand, I think at least some of us have been fortunate enough to have this experience. And so a couple of questions, right, naturally come up. First of all, how do we get there? Right? How do we get to a place where our character is so full of this virtue that we're infectious, we're contagious, right, to the people that are around us? Another question, what virtue should I cultivate? There's a long list of these things: chastity, generosity, charity, love, sympathy, and more, so many, right? So how do I pick one? Well, that's where the politics comes in. I thought I would try and see, because remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to solve the world's problems, okay? That's number 4. That's Chinese proverb number 4. devote your life to a noble cause, right? So that's one thing we're trying to do. And we're going to try and pick the right noble cause, unlike Chairman Mao and Vladimir Putin. We're going to try and pick the right noble cause so that this will move us on to the eternal happiness of Chinese proverb number 5, which is know yourself, right? So that's the agenda. So I picked sympathy to start with. Why? Well, I think, at least in my opinion, the biggest issue facing us right now is these mass shootings. This is something relatively new in my life. They're just amazing. These things are happening all the time. We're just shooting each other all the time. And we have these tremendous policy debates, right? You have people on both sides of this issue that are fighting. One side thinks that the best thing to do is take away the guns. I'm oversimplifying here because I'm not a politician. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. The other side thinks that the best thing to do is arm yourself, right? Roughly speaking, you've got these two sides. Get rid of the guns, hold on to the guns, right? And one thing that I think we lose sight of is the fact that no one actually wants more mass shootings. We're all on the same side in a certain sense, right? I mean, there may be a few pathological types, but for the most part, no one on either side of the aisle wants more mass shootings. We all want less. And I think we could all agree that in a more sympathetic society, fewer people would be shooting each other. I think that's fairly common sense. It may seem too naive, right? It may seem too obvious, but no one's talking about it. You don't hear any politicians saying we need to be more sympathetic. No one says that. I never heard any. I don't follow this stuff as well as probably some of you do. Nevertheless, it's not in the headlines. That much I know. Be more sympathetic. They're not telling. There's no sympathy legislation. I'm not seeing any of that, right? And yet clearly that would solve the problem. And what's ironic about it is we fight so hard for these policy changes, we wind up losing, we wind up hating the other side, right? We wind up losing whatever sympathy we actually have in the policy fights, right? Completely ironic outcome. Abortion, same thing. No one wants more abortions. Even the people who are having more abortions don't want more abortions. They don't want them, They just have to have them, right? We agree on that. Both sides. Some people think it's better to make it illegal, other people don't. But the bottom line is no one wants these things. What's the problem? Well, there's some medical problems occasionally, but generally it's lust. Generally, the problem behind unwanted pregnancy is lust. And so less lust, fight your lust. I'm not hearing anyone say that either. No one is saying that maybe lust unbridled isn't such a great idea for our society. I'm not hearing anybody say that. Homelessness, greed, right? It's the simple solution. Nobody wants more homeless people. We're all on the same side there. Even the homeless people don't want more homeless people, right? We're all on the same side of that issue. But I don't hear anyone talking about we shouldn't be greedy. And yet, clearly there's enough money to solve the problem in this country. We just want to spend it somewhere else, right? These are the root causes that are common to the policy debates. I've singled out 3. Lust, anger, sympathy, you could say. Anger, you could say, is the cause of shootings, either premeditated or spontaneous. So lust, rage, and greed. I'm singling out these 3 enemies of our society. So now the question is, and I think we can all agree on that, but that's the first thing we have to do, I think, is admit that these are in fact problems. It's not clear to me that as a society we have done this. You would think that it's obvious, and yet social media, entertainment industry, you see these things glorified quite frequently, right? It's possible that as a society we need to hear this, that these things unbridled are not helping us. right? And I think deep down we know this, and yet we just don't talk about this because we don't think it's practical to solve these problems. This is not approachable. What we can do is make policy, right? And so the question is, how do you go about solving these things, right? And in spite of the fact that our society at times seems a little blind to their danger, there's no shortage of examples of how these things destroy the individual. We see that again and again. Just a trip to the supermarket, looking at the tabloids, it's right there, destroying their lives. One of these three, right? I'll start with mass shootings, and this is going to give us, I'm going to go through some examples, and hopefully this is going to give us a practical method on how to fight these things. So, what happens with the mass shooting? It's the same thing again and again, right? Somebody comes and they shoot up something, school, church, whatever. The police go and they look into the person's mind. They look at his computer, they look at his blogs, they look at his journals, all those things. What do they find? They find a mind full of hatred. That's what they find every single time, a mind full of hatred, right? The shooter has been thinking and thinking and thinking thoughts of hatred for months before he actually did what he did, right? That's always what happens. It's not even interesting anymore. It's happened so many times. We know this, right? And then after he finally thinks and thinks and thinks, all these thoughts of hatred, he goes and does this terrible thing. And so we have the first entry on the board today. First you think, and then comes action. Right? First you think it, then you do it. This is an experience that I think we've all had. And I'm going to bring up one shooter in particular because his story is a little bit interesting. And you probably don't remember the name. There have been so many of these people. His name's Ethan Crumbley. He shot up a high school in Oxford, Michigan a couple years ago. They went through his journals and they found drawings of him shooting people and blood everywhere. And on the drawings it said, "The thoughts won't stop, help me." The thoughts won't stop, help me, right? And this, I think seeing that, we could actually make the argument that he didn't want to kill people. What he really wanted to do was stop thinking about killing people. And this, again, is an experience that we've all had. How many times we called somebody on the phone that we thought, you shouldn't call that person on the phone, right? Oh, but they should call me. How come they haven't called me? Whatever it is, right? And you think and think and think and do, and then you finally do it, right? Just, you want to shut your mind up. Go call that person, get it over with, right? Or that last chocolate chip cookie or whatever it is, right? We've all had this experience. It's the same common experience. You can't get the thoughts out of your mind. They drive you to the action. And this pretty simple relationship actually explains a lot of the destruction that we see in people's lives. I mean, did Ethan Crumbley want to grow up to become a mass shooter? Does anybody want to do that? You get a bunch of 6-year-olds in a room, you ask them what they want to be when they grow up. Astronaut, ballerina, president of the United States, basketball player, movie star, whatever, right? Nobody says, when I grow up, I hope that I'll cheat on my spouse and have a messy divorce and lose my house. I hope that when I grow up, I'll be an accountant for a big company and embezzle a bunch of money and go to jail, right? Nobody ever says that. And yet this happens again and again. How does this happen? Let's take the stealing example, okay? A kid wants a toy, right? And his friends have the toys. And he can't afford the toy, or his parents think he shouldn't have the toy. Whatever it is, he wants it so bad and he can't have it, right? But he can't stop thinking about it. Maybe he'll even go to the toy store to look at it. He'll go to a friend's house. He'll make friends with people he doesn't even like so he can play with this toy, right? And then one day he gets the chance and he steals the toy, right? Thought led to action. Well, this won't be the last toy that he wants, right? There will be other toys, and the next time it'll be much easier to take it. Pretty soon, repeated action leads to habits. Habits. Okay, can't write. This board is bouncy. Pretty soon we've got a habit. Startlingly easy to form these habits. Very difficult to give up. Seems kind of perverse, but new habits are so easy to start and so difficult to let go of. But that seems to be how it works here. So we've got a habit. And now that we have a habit, we get in the habit of stealing, we grow up and we become a thief. Because this is what? This is our character, right? We say someone who steals again and again is a thief. In other words, what we call character is really just a collection of these habits. Multiple habits. The thief, he may have other things. He may like to garden, or he likes kitty cats or whatever, but he's a thief, right? And he also has some other habits, some other defining traits of his character, right? Now, what I'm talking about here doesn't really require any religious belief. It's just kind of common sense. The next step in this diagram, I would say, does require perhaps a small leap of faith. And that is, every religion in the world will tell you that your character determines your destiny. Right? Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. Karma, as the Bible says, whatsoever a man soweth, that also shall he reap. Every religion will tell you this in some form or another. And you say, well, yeah, okay, but it seems like a lot of people are getting away with a lot of stuff here. Doesn't seem like that always happens. Sometimes it happens quickly, like with Ethan Crumbley. His destiny, he got shot, that's it. Sometimes it takes a long time to see it. One example of that I still find amazing is Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, when I was growing up, I grew up in West Los Angeles, and I knew a lot of people in the entertainment industry. Bill Cosby was a known sexual predator in the 1970s. When I was in the 5th grade, I knew that Bill Cosby was a sexual predator. Now, 10 years after that, he had this incredible show, The Cosby Show, and he was like the most popular guy in this country, arguably. America's Dad, he was called. Held up as an exemplar for the black community. And who could have thought that 30 years later he'd be in jail as a sex offender, a jailed sex offender? Unthinkable in 1987, right? Another one, Bernie Madoff. $65 billion he stole. Started back in the 60s, they say. In 1991, he was appointed chairman of the NASDAQ, one of the most powerful people on Wall Street, right? Who could have imagined in 1991 that 30 years later he would die in jail, right? But destiny did catch up with these people. Again, there they are. Bill Cosby, it's lust. Ethan Crumbley, it's rage. Bernie Madoff, it's greed. These same 3 things, lust, rage, and greed, right? They infect the individual. And what is society but a collection of individuals? Doesn't matter what the government is. Democracy, communist government, whatever it is, makes no difference. If the individuals upon which it stands are overcome by these things, the government has no chance, right? I think we can all agree on that. And so the lesson here is that this all proceeds from thoughts, right? This all starts with thoughts. It's amazing when you think about it. All this starts with thoughts. Those three thoughts: lust, rage, and greed. There's others, of course. I'm just getting those three out today. And so what do we do? How do we meet this problem? How do we overcome this? We have to change this. We have to change the way we think. That's what we have to do. And the Vedantic answer to changing the way we think is yoga. There are different kinds of yoga. One of the most popular ones right now is meditation, called Raja Yoga. And Raja Yoga is all about the science of controlling the mind. And talking about exactly how to meditate to a diverse group of people like this meaningfully is impossible. So I can't really do that, but I'll just say a few things that I think are universally applicable. The basic prescription that Vedanta gives is a kind of mental allopathy. So whatever unwanted thought comes into our mind, we try to replace it with its opposites in real time. Okay? So we have a thought of hatred or resentments towards someone, right? We have to identify it in real time, immediately. Hey, this is a thought of hatred. I want to get rid of this. That requires a kind of awareness, right? We have to be aware of our thinking. And then we have to replace it with its opposites. What does that mean? What that means is we imagine this person, whoever it is, and however much resentment we have against this person, however legitimate that resentment seems to us, we imagine this person smiling, joyful, full of love, surrounded by lights. We have to do this. It doesn't matter what this person has done to us. We have to come to the understanding that our hatred, our resentment, however legitimate it seems, is not helping us. It is not helping the other party. It is not helping this country. So we have to come somehow to that awareness. No hatred is justified. All thoughts of hatred must be met with thoughts of love. That is Vedantic allopathy. Broadly speaking, another way of changing the way we think is changing the way we act. So if we are plagued with thoughts of greed, and why? Why? That's another question we have. Why is one mind, it seems one mind is so greedy and so angry, right? Ethan Crumbly, not all kids want to shoot everyone. Why did he? We don't know. Why does Bernie Madoff so greedy and other people are not that greedy? We have these minds. We were born with these things. We don't really know why they think the way they think. And we don't really know how to change it. We try to change it. We try to change the way we think, and we find a tremendous resistance to it, right? The example I just gave, where you have a thought of resentment and you're going to think a thought of love, that thought of love could be, depending on the size of the resentment that we have, that thought of love could be like an insect buzzing around, right? And our resentment could be like an 18-wheeler truck on the freeway that just goes pow and hits that bug and smashes it on the windshield, right? This happens. We have resentments that are so strong, and we think, I'm going to think my way out of this. This mind has this habit of resentment. Where did it come from? I don't know. It doesn't matter, because answering that question won't solve the problem. Have to control it, have to change it, change the way it thinks. And when we have a really charged feeling like that, a really emotional negativity that comes up, we have to breathe. We just have to slow down and breathe deeply, slowly, through the nose, right? Because until we practice meditation, we actually don't really realize the physical damage that strong emotions are subjecting our bodies to. If we sit for meditation regularly, we watch the mind regularly, we will feel this. We will feel the charge of certain thoughts. And we will be aware immediately that this thing is way too strong for my allopathic Vedantic solution. Right? I just need to breathe deeply because this thought has changed my breathing. It has made it faster, more shallow. It has elevated my blood pressure and my heart rates. See, in our busy day, we're not even aware of this. We're so caught up in the moment. But when we go to sit and meditate, we review all these things. And we see them a little differently. And we think, wow, this thought is really toxic to me. We become aware of this. And that's why I say it doesn't matter how legitimate our anger or resentment seems. It is hurting us. So, other than meditation, I was on greed. The other method we have to approach this is action. So we engage in contrary action because, like I said, sometimes these thoughts are so strong that thinking a contrary thought isn't really an option. We're done breathing, we've still got the problem, right? Now it's time to go do something about it, right? So if we're greedy all the time, we want to steal or something, we have to do something charitable. Be charitable, right? Do something kind. And we have to be charitable and kind, give of ourselves, our time, our money, whatever it is, with the understanding that we are getting nothing in return. We're not getting a tax break. We're not getting any recognition. We're not getting whatever. There is nothing. There is no tangible benefit from my giving of myself or my time or whatever. Why? Why is that important? Because every thought that we think and every action that we undertake is connected by a kind of feedback loop. So, where'd it go? So we think and then we act. And we act, and it is recorded in the mind. This is another experience that we've all had. Yes, it's a religious teaching, but it's something that we all know. Any one of us who's tried to tell a story and can't remember the name of whoever it is, right? A story about a book or a movie or whatever, and we can't remember the name of the author, and we stumble through it, and then the next morning in the shower, Ernest Hemingway, right? Or whatever it was, right? We've all had this experience. We all know that, right? So this is just a fact of life, an experience. What is it? That action of trying to remember that didn't work, it had an effect on the mind. The mind recorded that. We are aware of it, the subconscious mind, burping up this thought. Why? Because we were looking for it. But the fact is that the mind is burping up thoughts all the time into our conscious mind. The subconscious mind is in this constant indigestion state, where it's burping up all these memories and fears and remorse and resentment and anxiety and all that, constantly bubbling up all this stuff up based on our past actions, right? That's what it's doing. So when we go to act charitably, consciously, without any hope of anything in return, this also is recorded in the mind. And what bubbles up later? I do good because I am good. See, that's something we have to do. When we give of our time, it necessarily forces us to tell our mind. The mind says, why am I doing this? Why are you doing this? You're not getting anything out of this, right? We say, we tell the mind, I am doing this because I am a good person, right? And so that thought, I do good things because I am a good person, gets burped up by the subconscious mind just like everything else. This is purifying. This is a purifying thought. We are depositing in the subconscious bank accounts purity. That's what we're doing, right? And the subconscious mind does what it does. It burps, right? Just burps it right back up into the conscious mind. And it changes from there, it changes our actions, right? This changes our thoughts. That thought, I'm a good person, I'm a generous person, changes the nature of our actions, right? So why did we talk about all this? Remember what we were trying to do. We're trying to fulfill Swami Paramananda's instruction. I'll remind you what he said. The true help that you can render to mankind is when, by your very character, you teach others. Then you do good by your every word, your every movement. So what does that mean? It means we think and think and think of the virtue that we are trying to cultivate. We act upon that virtue. It trickles down the diagram until we reach character. Character then teaches without any effort. We don't have to tell, see, it's much easier to tell people to be virtuous, right? To be virtuous ourselves and have people observe it. Very different, much more effective, very difficult. Much easier to scold other people for being selfish, right? And so I think this is a wonderful prescription that we should all do, which is why I talked about it today. But there's a couple of questions. One is, well, what about perfection? We've talked about politics, we've talked about how to think. What about perfection? Where does that come in, right? What is perfection? Well, I kind of hinted at it at the beginning, right? It's this self-knowledge, this knowledge of spirit, right? And what is that knowledge of spirit? It is knowledge of oneness, unity, right? Whenever we see any difference, I'm different than you, I'm different than this podium, I'm different than whatever else, we have fallen from perfection. Perfection is that knowledge of unity, right? And all these thoughts that I have encouraged us to try and cultivate today are all unitive, right? Easy to see. Sympathy, clearly. And all their opposites are divisive. All these thoughts of hatred are divisive. They're based on difference, right? All these virtues that we're trying to cultivate are unitive. Sympathy, charity, obviously unitive. Chastity, maybe you think, well, what about that one? That, the idea there is to love the general, right? When we love a particular person or persons, right, our family and friends or whatever, naturally we have less love for others. Can't help it. You may not like it. I want to love everyone, but I love my dog more than everybody else, or whatever. And so the idea behind chastity is to love all. Love the general, not the particular, right? That is the model behind chastity. Okay, universal love, what we call universal love. So that's perfection. And we reach it through this diagram. And so the next question I would say is, what about the happiness, right? I said we were going to do Chinese proverb number 4, devote your life to a noble cause, right? So that we could reach number 5, be happy for eternity. And devoting your life to a noble cause is supposed to make you happy for a lifetime. This seems like maybe just a lot of work for a lifetime. Maybe it doesn't seem like a lot of happiness for a lifetime. The other question is, it seems like it might take a really long time to do this, right? I mean, even if I spend my whole life trying to be sympathetic, compassionate, and maybe it takes me 30 or 40 years to get there, and then 3 or 4 people notice, right, that I'm better, nicer person, how much of a change have I really made? Was that worth it, right? Swami Vivekananda addresses these concerns. He says, we all struggle. Think about that. We all struggle, right? You're not going to avoid that one here. We all struggle. If we cannot reach the absolute, we will get somewhere. So if we don't reach perfection, we will make progress. And it will be better than we are now. What does that mean? It means if we progress on the path of increasing our sympathy and compassion, yes, better than we are now, it means happier, happier. We will have, our hearts will enlarge. That's it. The larger heart makes us happier people, not just better, but happier people, right? And then he says, possibly some of us will be able to do it in this life. See, in Vedanta, we've got this idea of multiple lifetimes, right? This could be a long haul I'm talking about. But it's possible we could do it in this life, he says. He says, like a flash it comes as the result of our past work. Who knows, but some here are old yogis with just a little to do to finish the whole work. Practice, that's what he says. And just in case you're wondering, he didn't give this lecture in India where you might think there's a whole bunch of old yogis. He gave it in this country. He says, who knows, but some people here could be a bunch of old yogis, right? It is possible. We don't know our capacity until we try. We don't know how difficult this is going to be until we actually set ourselves to the task, right? And so another interesting thing he says, this point that we all struggle. We are going to work for something here. We have no choice. Just like you can't stop thinking, you can't stop acting. You may think that you can stop thinking, you can't. The mind thinks. We think that we think, but we don't. The mind thinks whether we like it or not. And it has its own agenda, as I think I already talked about today. And so those thoughts are going to lead to actions. We are going to do something here. How else should we spend our time? Is it better to argue about gun control, for example? We could spend our whole lives shouting about our side of this issue and never convince the people who love their guns to give them up. Or even if we do, even if we actually vanquish the other side in our policy debates, who's to say how long it's going to last? Look at the marijuana laws and the abortion laws. It's all reversed. A few decades later, everything we worked for could be gone, right? These things are not permanent, these changes, right? They swing back and forth. So in the meantime, this program, even though we may only connect with a few people, it will be real, because once we convince someone else of the virtue of whatever it is, they're sold and they're going to try and do it themselves. Like I said, a lot of us have seen this in our own lives. And so I want to qualify this last bit. I want to say that I don't think, or I don't want to make you think that I think, that all policy debates are useless, because I don't. I'm going to talk about someone who actually had a huge policy fight that I think was useful. Her name is Arlene Lawrence. Anybody heard that name, Arlene Lawrence? No, okay. She wrote a book, so it's possible you could have heard of her, although it's somewhat obscure, I admit. Anyway, she was a crusader, high school teacher. Nice Jewish lady in Brooklyn, teaching at a school of entirely brown and black people. And the school was, by any reasonable metric, hopeless. Students were drug-addled, pregnant, truants, defiant, illiterate. I mean, and then, the ones that showed up, half maybe of the student body on any given day, many of them are completely lawless, roaming the halls defiantly, right? And so she's going to go in there and she's going to be part of the problem. That's part of the problem. Hello, part of the solution. She's going to be part of the solution, right? She's going to fight this at the ground level. And so what does she do? She fights and fights and fights and drives herself crazy. In her own words, she says, I complained, I cried, I accepted hopelessness. I put down the rest of the faculty for everything they weren't doing. I devoted all my energies to trying to change others and change the system. Right? What happened? She wound up making herself sick. She got a heart virus and wound up flat on her back for 6 months. And during that 6 months, she had a complete transformation. And in fact, in later years, she's still alive. So this happened in the late 60s. She's like 84 now. she had this complete transformation, and in later years she realized that what she thought was a heart virus was actually a spiritual experience that gave that kind of, it was a change, a literal change of heart. She had a change of heart that she thought was a medical problem because it was so strong, so overwhelming, right? This change of heart that she had. In her own words, she says, during my convalescence, I began to discover that I was filled with gratitude and appreciation, that I loved more universally, and that I was in a constant state of love. That is a sign of a spiritual experience. When we are uplifted and our outlook changes, right? We feel an expansion of heart and a shift in perception. And that's what she had, right? And so what happened after she's done? She goes back to work at the school, goes back to crusading, except now she does it totally differently. What does she do now? She tries to be the love that she wants to see. She has this positive viewpoint. She's going to be the love that she wants to see instead of hating the darkness that she saw already, right? That's what she was doing. In fact, I would say if there's one thing to take away from this talk today, be the love that you want to see instead of hating the darkness that you see already is pretty good. And so that's what she did. And of course, her results were much better. She wound up writing a book, like I mentioned, called The Love Principles. And one of the love principles was be the change that you want to see, which is famous. It's on bumper stickers. It's occasionally misattributed to Mahatma Gandhi because it sounds a lot like him. But he's not the one who wrote that down first. He might have said it, but actually she's the one who came up with that slogan. Arlene Lawrence, this humble little teacher in New York. Be the love, be the change that you want to see, right? It's also basically what Swami Paramananda is talking about. Be the change that you want to see. That's this, right? So what I'm talking about today, nothing new really, except maybe how. How to be the change that you want to see. And how is that? The way to be the change that you want to see is to fill our minds with the thoughts that we want to see outside of ourselves. Right? Think the thoughts that you want to see in this world. That's the basic prescription here. Do this again and again and again through meditation and action and all the other yogas that are at our disposal until whatever it is trickles down this diagram and permeates our character. At that point, we become an automatic source of change for the better, right? When we actually become the virtue that we want to see, we spread that virtue, not even consciously, unconsciously we do it, right? And so this is why I bring her up. Not every policy debate is just a bunch of hot air. She fought and fought and fought. And what's valuable about her fights is not that she fought until she vanquished the other side. That's what we're trying to do now in this country, it seems to me, right? Each side of the issue is trying to fight and fight and fight until they vanquish the opposing side and inflict their will on everyone, right? That's not why her policy fight was useful. It was useful because it caused her to shift her perspective, right? It brought her to a shift in perspective. And just like is Arlene Lawrence, there are politicians that are doing this because they legitimately are fighting for the light, they think. And then there's politicians who are just fighting because they want to hear themselves roar and they want to hold on to their power, right? Obviously, these two things are happening. And this, according to Swami Vivekananda, is the value of everything in this world. The value of every experience that we have is in this question: does it elevate us to a higher perspective? Right? He says this world, if it helps us on to that goal, is all right. If not, it begins to bind one more layer on the thousands already there, it becomes an evil. And this isn't just true about policy debates, it's true about everything according to him. Whatever it is we're going through in life, whatever it is we're experiencing, even some of the bad stuff, has value if it's leading us on to a change in perspective, an elevation of our consciousness. He says possessions, learning, beauty, everything else, as long as they help us to that goal, they are of practical value. When they have ceased helping us on to that goal, they are a positive danger. And so that goal is perfection. And what I've tried to talk about today is that it all starts from thoughts. And like I said, I think the prescription here basically is to do what we can to fill our minds with the thoughts that we want to see outside of ourselves. That's what we're trying to do here. That is spiritual practice, right? And so this is the noble cause that I would say Vedanta advocates. And I would also say it's the noblest of all causes. Why? Because we will never really be satisfied with what we see outside of ourselves until we see perfection. That is the end point. We will never stop. It is our nature. According to Vedanta and probably our personal experience, once we've had an experience with something, we're ready to move on to something else. That's just how we are. And so once we've managed to see a slightly better world, we will go up and up and up, and we will never stop until we see perfection. So this is the noblest of all enterprises. Because seeing perfection is knowing perfection is being perfection, is Chinese proverb number 5. Knowing ourselves is eternal happiness, right? That is our journey from politics to perfection. May the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified with the armor of love, goodwill, joy, and understanding, peace,